Got 3 questions. Number 1, I didn't even know about this, but maybe it says Robbie D been released following his arrest. I didn't even know he was arrested.
Well, once again, the power of the internet. A lot of people made a big deal out of it. Robbie went to visit a friend of his in Canada over Thanksgiving week, had an argument. She called the police and said some things that he was alleged to have done. Here's my legal speak. That was blown up out of proportion, and because it was Thanksgiving weekend and he was an out-of-country resident, before they could do paperwork to release him, they had to leave him sitting there for a while. And they're not exactly the brightest country as a whole, to be honest with you. Now we get all kinds of calls from Canada. And so, now he's back home, and I think it's going to be no more bother to him. I think it'll all be straightened out.
Okay, have you thought about bringing in some veterans to help work some matches with some of your younger guys? And he brought up 2 names that, if you were thinking of this, you probably would think of, and that's Bobby Eaton and Tommy Rogers.
Well, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've been talking to Bobby, on and off, and probably the only reason he hasn't been here so far has just been because it's been a screwy holiday schedule for us, and we had everything all planned out. But after the first of the year, I would love to have Bobby come up and have classes and matches with these guys. I think that'd be a tremendous help. Tommy Rogers would be fabulous too, because I always loved his style, and he's an excellent teacher. But he's still wrestling somewhat professionally in terms of not anxious to come and be a trainer, more out there on the road. So, it might happen.
Also, he wants to know, when can we expect to see Smoky Mountain videos for sale on the website?
Somebody asked me this last time, and I said soon, and now it's even sooner, because I actually have a Christmas vacation. I might be able to get that done by then.
Okay. This is a funny one. I don't know why. I read this, and I started laughing at this question. It says, this is from Tony Vicencio, who goes, is it true that you and Shawn Michaels don't like each other, or is that just another internet rumor?
It's just another silly internet rumor.
That's true.
Oh, God.
Let's see. This is from JP in San Francisco, who says, the promo you gave in Smoky Mountain Wrestling when you said goodbye to the Heavenly Bodies after losing a Loser League Town match against the Rock and Roll Express stands out as one of my favorite promos of all time. The way you went down the history of your feud with Ricky Morton was something wrestlers today should pay attention to when building hype for upcoming matches. My question is, did you give that promo to add shock value to your managing the Rock and Roll Express soon after, or was that just a reflection of the career and character of Jim Cornette, the manager?
Actually, I just thought it really summed things up at the moment, and it was a cool thing to say. That was really what it was. It just brought, because that was when the Bodies were headed to the WWF from Smoky Mountain. They lost to Loser Leave Town, and we were in the hallway of the arena where it happened, and did the promo like we'd come out of the commissioner's office trying to appeal, and it was fruitless, and they were gone, and I cut the promo, and it just seemed like that brought the story to a close. And then they turned and they walked down the hall, and do you remember seeing it? What was the sappy music that we played?
God, I forgot. I do remember it.
Bob Seger, the famous final scene.
Yeah.
And they're walking down the hall, and I stop about halfway, and they keep on walking, and right before we go to black, Jimmy Del Rey kind of turns and looks over his shoulder at me and has a tear in his eye, and they turn their heads and hang their heads and go out the door, and that's the end of it. And it's, the sappy music and everything. It was just cool. So that's how we did it.
That was a really awesome piece of TV. I remember that now. Now you brought that up.
And it cost us about 15 minutes and a blank tape to produce. So, it was especially cool because of that.
This is from Todd Martin. This is not for you, Jim. There's a couple of questions I wanted to get to before we started taking phone calls.
Okay.
It says, in the Written Observer this week, you referred to Jim Ross having a very short stint as an amateur wrestling announcer, which led to a panic and voiceovers being done before it aired. I've never heard this story. What's this all about? Do you remember the story, Jim, by any chance?
Faintly. I remember him doing the Falcons. I don't remember this, I don't think.
Okay, this would have been early 90s, probably prior to the Goodwill games. I think they had some series on TBS, which was like where they would go through like Olympic sports and have like major meets from the Olympic sports, kind of as a way to build up the Olympics. I forget what it was called, but anyway, Jim Ross got the job of announcing. I think it was a national amateur championship meet, but it was a major amateur meet. He did the announcing, everything was fine, and before it aired, people in the actually, right after, Jim Ross, I believe, did it with Russ Hellickson, who was a very famous amateur wrestler from, I'm thinking, maybe late 60s, early 70s. And, everything was fine there. Then after Jim Ross left, everyone was just like, oh, my God, that's Jim Ross, the pro wrestling announcer. And, amateur wrestling people still hate pro wrestling. And it was just like, it had nothing to do with whether...
They must hate good announcing, too.
Well, I don't think that the quality of the announcing ever was an issue. It was just that this pro wrestling announcer came and did it, and people, freaked. And when the thing finally aired, which was 6 weeks later, and there was lots of controversy during that period, I remember sitting down to watch the thing, just because I was kind of curious as how Jim Ross would do doing amateur wrestling, and, just because I wanted to see the show. And lo and behold, Jim Ross was not on the show, and they had an announcer who did voiceovers who was not, they never showed, any scenes of him, actually there. And they showed, so he was edited completely out of the tape.
Yeah, I think that guy just wanted clarification that it was just because he was a pro wrestling announcer, not anything wrong with the announcing. Because when I first read that, I thought, what the hell was wrong with his announcing? And then I remember that story, so.
That's so silly to remove someone who did a good job at something just because they do something else you don't like.
Well, the reason that they used for removing him, okay, was that they claimed that he was trying to recruit, and I believe it was Bruce Baumgartner, although I could be wrong about the wrestler, into pro wrestling. And the amateur people were mad. And I don't think that any of that was I have no doubt he probably went up to him and was talking to him and may have thrown in something like, have you ever thought about pro wrestling, which is a natural question. And the guy said no. And then all of a sudden it's like, he's out here trying to steal our talent.
Yeah, well, Lord, we can't have these guys, out there training their whole life and actually get paid for it. So
at some point. Let's see. This is also from John Spratt, who's talking about last night's ECW show, and he goes, did it sell out? Yes, it did. How many seats does the ballroom have? He goes, I'm assuming 3,500. It was about 2,600. I don't know the exact number, but that's the ECW show at the Hammerstein Ballroom. And the next pay-per-view will be from the same location on January 7th. This is from John Mozuku, who goes,
Speaking of that, who were they chanting "You sold out" to last night?
Jerry Lynn.
Oh, was it?
Who's still with the company.
I know, that's what I was wondering.
But hell, he just sold out anyway.
But he did go and ask for a job Tuesday with WWF. So
just chanting in the ballroom.
You can't have these guys training all their life and expect to get paid.
I got to say that the "You sold out" chants at ECW
are so lame.
I mean, they are so lame, and especially they're lame under any circumstances. Okay, but under these circumstances, to chant that at Jerry Lynn, as hard as that guy has worked in that company for the last 2-3 years, is just so sad. I mean,
how many weeks do you have to not get paid before you're not selling out?
But it's not even that. I mean, if you can get a better job elsewhere, that's really good, and I think they should be really happy that this guy worked so hard for them. Because I mean, if it was some guy who was let's throw out a guy who's lazy, Kevin Nash. Okay, I haven't picked on him in a day. All right, Kevin Nash, who did nothing for 4 years in WCW, collected this giant paycheck, kind of manipulated the whole dressing room to where the whole company's a total disaster. All right, and then he goes to WWF. Let's say when his contract's up in a year or whenever the thing is up, okay? If those fans chanted, "You sold out, you sold out," they would be wrong. But they wouldn't. But I wouldn't be nearly, But the situation, at least they could say, you ruined our company. Well, you paid all this money and all that, and more power to him. Okay, and then you abandon ship. Okay, but with Jerry, I mean, it's like this guy worked so hard and didn't get paid, a lot of weeks. And I mean, if he can get a job somewhere, more power to him, and they should be happy that they got to see all those great matches that Jerry Lynn delivered for him.
Wouldn't it be better if, let's say, for example, let's pull a wild idea out of thin air. If the promotion made it clear from the start that yes, we enjoy it when our talent is picked to go to the biggest stage in wrestling and make a ton of money, because that shows that our guys not only have what it takes to hang with the big boys, but get chosen up to worldwide stardom, and we foster that environment instead of creating the environment where the people will chant, "You sold out, you sold out." Wouldn't that be beneficial to that smaller promotion? I'm just wondering. Just a spree idea.
This is from John Mozuke. Would Jim Cornette take the job as the autonomous head of World Championship Wrestling with 100% full control? And if so, what would he do to change the product to make it better?
Two-part question. Number one, yes, I would. I would take the autonomous control, and then I would promptly sell everything of value in the warehouse, pocket the cash, and bail out of town under cover of darkness. To make the product better, I would suggest an acetylene torch and a can of gasoline. So that's the only really fair way I can answer that question. But there is profit to be made, because I figure if you just got in the warehouse and sold the rings alone, you'd come up with 15 or 20 grand you could take off with. So right there, I've changed a $60 million loss to a $20,000 profit.
Okay. Let's go to Phil in D.C. Phil, what's going on?
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
I want to make a comment and then a question for Jim. I went to the Mega Reunion show this weekend, and they probably had the best ECW title defense I've seen in maybe 2 years.
Oh, the Carino match.
With Steve Carino against Champagne. It was really cool. I think you would have liked it, Jim. It was very Southern.
Oh, yeah, and I know both those guys. They work their ass off, too.
Yeah, it was very, it was a lot of, like, punches and kicks. It actually reminded me, like, of a Lawler, like, Buddy Vandell match or something like that, where, like, all the transitions were punches and the crowd was really into it. Like, it was the opposite of the crowd at the pay-per-view. Like, the crowd of that show was smaller, but they were, like, super into everything everybody did. And
that's a difference in geography.
Yeah, it was a great, it's so much better. I mean, I'm from the West Coast originally, but I live in the North, but I love going to wrestling shows in the South, because you don't have people with stupid chants and, trying to get them, fans are trying to get themselves over at the expense of what's going on. They're just really into the matches.
Yeah, we try to sell the fans down here tickets to the seats instead of tickets into the ring to be part of the show. But it works out better for that because it makes the fans work less hard to enjoy the show, and it makes us work less hard to be able to live to have another show.
Yeah, and it's more fun with, it's more fun to be a fan of a show like that because, just get into the, cheer for the babyface, boo for the bad guy. I don't know, any of you guys ever seen a gimmick of a guy named Lazarus? He works at NWA Wildside, and he was at that show. He's got probably the funniest gimmick I've ever seen in, like, all the wrestling I've watched from around the world.
I have not seen that.
I just got a bunch of Wildside tapes, and I actually have not seen him, but he's been on the tapes that I have, and I probably will end up seeing him within the next week or two. But I know he's finishing. Is he the one with the finishing move that's called the Britney Spears?
He does a Britney Spears gimmick with, like, the full-on ponytails and the whole outfit, and he comes out to the song and does the dance. And it's absolutely hysterical. I don't really like comedy.
Tell me about his finisher. He does a spear, and he ends up like in a missionary position. Is that
missionary, the Britney Spear.
The Britney Spear.
And he has the missionary position, right? And he does a lap dance to the security guard. So he's
it sounds like it's tailor-made for me.
Oh, yeah, it does. It sounds like old Smoky Mountain gimmick. Pick him up and take him to Lehigh Valley. He kind of worked, too. He did a really nice tope con Io from the top rope to the floor in this little three-way match he had. And I swear, it's absolutely hysterical. I couldn't stop laughing. He's a baby face, which I don't think you see a guy who's doing a gay gimmick as a baby face in the South. It's just so weird. But, he was a complete baby face. I don't know if I can't think of it. You guys are both wrestling historical experts. Has there ever been a guy doing an outwardly gay gimmick who's worked as a baby face before?
Adrian Street turned in several territories.
Okay.
Yeah, Adrian was a great baby face because, once that he stopped doing the overtly, heel getting stuff and tried to tone it down a little bit, and then they got to where they liked him because he was funny, and he'd pinch the referee's ass and they'd laugh,
Goldust too.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And once he's around long enough for everybody to get familiar, then it's like, we get a kick out of that guy.
Yeah, I think I always thought that Pimpinella, who this guy actually reminded me of, always was, but you never see a lot of hate from him, from the Mexican crowds. I went to a show live in Mexico.
No,
and the crowd just like him.
Yeah, he's a real, he puts on a real entertaining show, and he's a super, I don't know what he's like now because I haven't probably seen him wrestle live in 5 years, but, when I used to watch him, he was a very talented worker.
Oh, he's a great worker. I saw him, I saw some tapes of him down in IWRG maybe, 6 months ago. He was awesome. It was a mat wrestling match against the Villanos. He took it right to the mat with like Villano 4, and they did all kinds of really quick counters and things like that.
It was real. I really had a tough time with him though the first time I saw him because Jim is like this guy like he dresses like in a women's bathing suit, and he looks so much like a woman. And he can go. He can go on the mat and wrestle, and he's a very good worker.
Yeah.
No, but it's just so freaky. The first thing you're just going like, this is just too weird looking that you don't know what to make of it, and then it like freaks you out the worst because he actually is a really good worker.
Yeah. And the cool thing about him, and I think also Lazarus, which is what I heard, is that it's legit. Like both guys aren't straight guys playing gay characters, actual gay guys doing the stuff, which I think is kind of cool.
I always got that impression with Pimpinella.
What?
I always got that impression with Pimpinella.
I've seen Pimpinella. I actually was backstage at a show. I was
Don't tell me. Don't tell me. That's enough. That's enough. This has gone far enough.
Oh, my Lord.
Okay, anything else?
I was actually just wondering what Jim, you did, because I was thinking about this, Lazarus. You did a lot of angles in Smoky Mountain, and a lot of them were really great, and some of them weren't. What do you think was like your biggest, one that you thought might look good out in front, and then came out when you actually put it on TV and ended up being terrible?
Oh, I think it would have to be The Mummy.
Yeah. I think
The Mummy is the classic bad. But you know what? I actually like it now because it was so bad and did flop so good that it was just fun. Here's The Mummy out there cutting his fingers off and sand's falling out of him, and people are going, So actually, I enjoyed it after that.
Yeah. Okay. That was the question I had. Good talking to you guys.
Jim, we got to get
running. Your stuff.
Thank you. Dave, I got to say one thing.
Yes.
How the mighty have fallen. We have just followed up an entire segment on a discussion of gay/transvestite wrestlers by plugging a program called Jockle Doodle Doo. It's a sad day.
Now you got me. Our new website, I'm not sure. I was going to make mention. For some reason, it must be harder to find the poll question. So, everyone, find that poll question.
It wasn't harder for Pimpolino
on the,
to find the poll question.
on the eYada website, yeah. Not on our website. The poll question's right there on the right. I can find that without looking for it.
Dave, on the new website, if you go to guest on the right-hand side, the poll question is under the guest folder.
Okay, the poll question is now under the guest folder for those of you who used to be voting every day and haven't found it. Okay. Just want to make mention because
who left it there? Damn it, they should pick up after themselves. They left the question under the guest folder.
Okay. This is, there's something here.
Is it every once in a while you just lose complete control of one of these, don't you?
The show?
Yeah.
Yeah, like last week with Vampiro and Violent J, which is actually something I wanted to read right now. But okay, this is could you ask Mr. Cornette of his impressions of Rob Van Dam and his chances of going to the WWF?
My impression of Rob Van Dam athletically is that he is amazing. He's fabulous. All the stuff that he does is, he defies gravity. I'm not sure that he's an all-around worker that can do any style, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because I've seen him have some stinker matches with some guys that couldn't go like that. Personally, I don't know Rob very well, but I know that, he did have one appearance at a WWF television where he was waiting on Paulie to tell him everything to do and didn't want to really do what was laid out, and it was kind of silly, and I don't know whether or not that maybe sometimes a guy needs a place where he can be the guy rather than one of the guys. That may be my impression. Or, and he does movies, too. Does he want to wrestle or act, or how committed is he to one or both? I don't know, I don't know much about Rob.
It's a real interesting little deal there because, he was the number one guy in ECW, and, he's owed money, and he's kind of sitting out right now, and I'm not sure where that all stands. And as far as going somewhere, it's like, even though he's the number one guy in ECW, as far as like prospects for WF and WCW, he's probably not anywhere close to the number one guy. Either of those companies, if they really knew what they were looking for, would pick off of that roster. Not saying that you couldn't use him, because harnessed correctly, he can be valuable to either company.
Yeah.
But again, there's a lot. But the Rob Van Dam match that does in ECW, he's really not going to have the freedom to do, because a lot of the guys aren't going to take that, like that Van Terminator move.
Yeah, all the top guys.
Yeah, none of those top guys are going to take that move. You have to understand, like, you can do it. He can do the move, but no one's going to sit there with that chair in front of their face while he kicks you from 20 feet in the air and gives you a bloody nose or something, or whatever, whatever that move
here's
entails.
An idea. If there was any credibility involved, would you still be standing there after he flew from 20 feet away, or would you have sidestepped and said, I think that's more of a performance match than a match.
I'd at least move the chair.
Yeah, I'd move my whole damn body, thank you. There's sometimes you can get away with milking, going to the top and coming off with a splash and everything, and people's attention are diverted, etc. But, that's why I just can't get into a lot of that when guys are staggering around waiting for somebody to come from 40 feet away and can't get out of the way in time.
that used to kill me in the Sabu matches. And in fact, when Sabu went to All Japan, I remember watching the tapes, and those fans would like laugh at those spots. I mean, just like absolutely, you hear the whole crowd laughing. And certainly, that's not the reaction that he was looking for, because the guy has to lay there on the table forever for him to set the spot up.
Yeah, it's like if in the World War II movies, if the Japanese soldiers were jumping up out of the bunker and standing there waiting for John Wayne to shoot them, it wouldn't have made as exciting a movie.
My favorite is the WCW hardcore matches when someone throws a garbage can at someone from like 5 feet away, and they still miss.
This is
got a lot of nearsighted guys that never played baseball down there.
This is from Harry, who goes, I love the Vampiro comedy jam show. Is there any way you could put in a good word for me with Violent J? Like Vampiro, I'm totally unknown in the music business, but I am a juggalo. I can complain bitterly about WCW, the best of them, and I've seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space 34 times. I want a 5-album, $500,000 deal. And then he just goes, all joking aside, when Vampiro said he was accessible to fans, it's a shoot. I was in a hotel bar after WCW Nitro a year ago. A kid ran past hotel security and got in the bar to get an autograph from Vampiro. When Barney Fife, number 2, I wonder who that was, ascertained what transpired, or maybe it's his assistant, he stomped into the bar, grabbed the kid, and Vamp goes, hey, lay off the kid. It was all my fault. It was quite a cool move on Vamp's part. So anyway.
What is a juggalo?
Juggalo means you're a fan of Insane Clown Posse.
Ah. Okay.
By the way, I don't know if we had talked about it on the show, but
I thought it was like the guy that spun the plates on the Ed Sullivan Show, the juggler. I wasn't sure.
Vampiro is still in WCW, and he's apparently attempting to maintain being in WCW.
What?
While he's injured, after all that has gone down. Yes, it's been quite an entertaining week.
I don't know the wisdom of saying what was said, which I read some of, and then going back, and I don't know the wisdom of taking anybody back that would say what was said. Which shows there may not be a lot of wisdom on either side of that relationship.
I will say this for Vampiro, he has never done anything on a live broadcast television. He's done it on this show. But on a live television show, he's never gone against the script that I'm aware of, which makes him, I won't say in the minority, but there's many guys that will be on the show tonight who have done that. One of them is the world champion, and 2 others are like the world tag team champions. So that was their punishment.
So basically what we're saying is that WCW is a wrestling version of Lowered Expectations.
No, I don't know what it's a version of, actually. Let's go to Wes in Virginia. Wes, what is WCW a version of?
Sure, let's do that.
Not sure. I wanted to ask Jim, with all the possibility with the ECW guys coming into the WWF and with all the developmental territories, I mean, is there really going to be enough spots till, the point eventually where people are going to start complaining? Like, obviously WCW's got its fair share of complainers.
Well, yeah, and, 2 totally different environments. I think there's always going to be guys saying, oh, shoot, I wish I had that spot instead of the other guy. But if there's more wrestling talent in the long run, that's good for the business. And you got to remember that guys that would make a move now from one company to the other already have several years of experience in most cases, whereas the developmental roster, you're looking at guys that are 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years maybe, some a little bit more but not many. Those guys are going to be valuable in 3 to 5 years. And in WCW, they don't really have a talent program in place to have a steady rotation, and the top guys age and wither on the vine without ever stepping down, and the young guys never get a break until they become old guys. So, it's 2 different atmospheres, but I think there's always going to be competition there's going to be fewer spots than there are wrestlers, but as long as the competition makes those guys work a little harder, a little better, maybe a little smarter, it's going to be good in the long run.
Also, I wanted to ask you, Jim, an old Jim Crockett question. What was the deal with
I know an old guy named Jim Crockett, so.
I wanted to ask you a question, though. The Midnight Express did an angle with the New Breed, and it was starting to get pretty good heat and all, and then it got dropped, only after a couple of weeks. What was the deal with that?
Real good reason they had a car wreck and about killed themselves.
Yeah.
And they pretty well weren't able to get in the ring when they were in their hospital beds. No, it was a serious car wreck, as I recall, and I can't remember the individual injuries, but they were pretty screwed up for a while, and that's where, we got derailed with it. It wasn't by any, intentional means. It just happened that way because they got injured.
Also,
that was a really weird, too, because those guys came in, they were starting to do real well, and they pretty much never heard from since, and then Sean Royal's now wrestling for Wildside, Chris Champion's bounced around Tennessee for 10, 12 years.
Yeah, Chris had, after the team split up, I think Sean decided to quit wrestling, and I don't know whether the injuries played a part in that or not. And Chris ended up having, various successes at various times, but Sean just started back a little while ago, and it may be good because he was a real good wrestler, and he saved 10 or 12 years of abuse on his body, so.
Also, Jim, I wanted to ask you about Chris Candido. I mean, here's a guy that, obviously has a lot of talent. I mean, I remember seeing him even before Smoky Mountain when he was in the Northeast Independents. And, he's still very young, but, I mean, what do you think his future, what happened, I guess? Was it too much too fast or high expectations? I don't know what happened to him.
Bad taste in women?
I think a lot of it had to do with both Chris and Tammy, being younger than most people who get to that spot, and then a combination of having their own problems and also having other people have problems around them that cause them problems. Chris is still a young guy, and hopefully not wrestling the regular schedule that he was a while back. He's managed to save, heal up a little bit and save some of his body. And Tammy's still a young girl, so you can never say never. I don't think it's too late for them to do something. I think that every time that the hierarchy somewhere that has a negative opinion of somebody passes over, as we've seen in WCW 47,000 times, then somebody else is willing to give somebody a chance. And hopefully everybody will be able to capitalize on it next time.
Brian.
Anyone heard how Candido's doing?
Chris has called me several times lately and left me messages, and I've called him and left him messages, and we haven't actually found each other personally yet, but he sounds good on the phone. Sounds like he's happy.
Okay. Anything else, Wes?
That's all I had. I appreciate the comments, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, Wes. Okay, let's go to Tony in Long Island. Tony, what's going on?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Doing good.
Hey, I just finished reading Gary Michael Capetta's book after you had him on the show a couple weeks ago, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it. Did you get a chance to read it yet?
Oh, I've read the book, yeah. Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was being totally straight. And when I read a wrestling book, the two things that I look for is the guy being honest, or is the guy just blowing smoke, and the other one is basically a fun book to read. And his book was, to me, the ultimate wrestling books for absolutely different reasons are Dynamite Kid's and Mick Foley's, okay? Gary Capetta's book I thought was as honest as any of them. I just thought that, Mick Foley just had funnier stories.
Right.
But I liked the Gary Capetta book. I thought he was, I just liked it.
I see Lou Thez has a book. Have you ever read that?
Yes, Lou Thesz's book to me is a lot of fun to read, just because there's all those stories in history that has pretty much been lost. And even though it's, historically maybe not perfect, when I read it, it was, at the time, it was the best wrestling book I had ever read. I would now go with
I would go along with that as well, just because, like you said, the history and the stories that were lost. And, you got to remember the one guy dealing with his memory at the age of 80 or whatever is never going to be as historically correct as the people who do research because they weren't there. But you can never read a story the same way as told by somebody that was there when nobody else was.
Well, I mean, that's why I think that book is so valuable, is because the thing is you got the Lou Thez who lived through and was the focal point of so much in wrestling for 50 years. And then plus he was the best friend of Strangler Lewis, who was the number one guy, going back from in the 1920s. So you have as close to, I guess what we call it, a second-hand version from the guy who Strangler Lewis was the mentor of that period, which is basically lost because everyone from that period is now gone. And Strangler Lewis was one of the most important people of that period. So you're not getting some guy who was wrestling at the time's version of history. You're getting Strangler Lewis, Billy Sandow, and what was the other guy? Toots Mondt were the guys who controlled wrestling. So you're getting you're getting what was going on politically from the guy who was right there politically doing it, as opposed to, wrestling, especially in those days, was such a secretive world that unless you got it from one of those three guys, you're just getting speculation. Because in those days, the boys didn't know which matches were works or shoots unless they were the two guys in the ring. That's how it was.
Yeah, but how honest do you think those guys were? Imagine a book that Vince McMahon would write.
Okay, you're right. I don't know that they're any more honest, but it's probably about as good as we're gonna get.
And
you're right.
I think, when I read Thesz's book, just judging from stories that I've heard from people that I would consider, to be knowledgeable in that area and just getting the flavor and knowing the flavor of the business. I think a lot of it's credible. Of course, you'll notice in Lou's book, and God bless Lou Thez, I think he's a wonderful human being, everybody comes up and introduces themselves to Lou, whether it be Bob Hope or the president or whoever. Lou never knows anybody. Everybody comes up to Lou. But you know what? I'll trade that for the stories. They're fabulous.
You know, some of that I would almost disagree with, though, because even if you like see China or anybody going on Jay Leno or whatever show, they'll always bring up that same 14 million voters, and they'll always talk about 93,000 fans at WrestleMania, and it's the Vince McMahon story, and they've all heard it so many times that they just have come to believe it.
Well, there's certainly from that era, we're never going to get the whole truth because for the two reasons. Number one, everyone's dead. And number two, even if they were alive, they were so steeped in that carny tradition that they would never tell the truth. So this is about the best we can get of it. I don't know. Yeah,
it's not even so much people being dishonest, just them hearing a lie so many times that all of a sudden they just decide it's the truth.
You know what's funny about that?
A guy like Thez was there the first time it was told.
Mm-hmm.
in some cases. But, you know, Brian, the one thing about that is, and this is really sad, but that's actually what history is. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't know that, but, like, I think that's probably like that in like, all forms of it. In everything, like, certain things that, whether they're true or not, when they get told enough, they become, you know, like in the history books of, like, you know, World War II, or certainly like, you know, the Declaration of Independence and all those stories, they're probably all about as accurate as 93,000 people at the Silver Dome.
I heard that they really exaggerated the pop for the Gettysburg Address.
Hey, Jim, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about NWA in the mid-'80s.
Uh-huh.
I've been, over the last year or two, I've seen a ton of tapes, and I tell you, I would put that up with just about any wrestling over the last 20, 25 years, as far as I think that was some of the greatest wrestling TV shows. You know, watching the WWF, they always have had the knack for the spectacle, the big pay-per-view shows, the WrestleManias, but I think those TV shows were as good as any shows we've ever seen, like I said, over the last 20, 25 years.
Well, I think that at that time, the guys in the NWA had taken wrestling about as far as they could to the edge and still make it the believable wrestling, as opposed to crossing the line into sports entertainment and standing there waiting for the guy to come from 40 feet away. I think that may be where it passed, and it's like you couldn't really go any farther without changing the concept of it. So that's why I really enjoyed those matches.
What Baby Doll with the Four Horsemen, whose idea was it to put her even on TV?
Dusty Rhodes loved Baby Doll. My little Marilyn Monroe.
Uh-huh.
My little Marilyn Monroe. So Dusty loved Baby Doll, and henceforth all the fans loved Baby Doll. It was amazing how it worked.
And let me ask you, I might be going out on a limb here, but being that Jim Crockett owned the promotion, would that be why we had to listen to David Crockett?
Yes, yes.
Well, you know, some people suspicioned that at one time, but David's pristine voice and clear commentary over the many years proved everybody wrong.
Jim, I gotta ask this. Okay,
He's got him by the honker. He's got him by the honker. Kicking like a dog. You know, that was basically David's thing. And, you know, all the guys, whenever you had to do an interview with him, I mean, you could have stood there and you could either blown sardine breath in his face or you could have farted up his nose, and he would have that same look on his face. And it was interesting.
We got to head to a break, but there's one thing did you ever get any heat? Because this was one of the funniest lines I ever heard in wrestling was when you were just this throwaway line. David Crockett said something stupid, and you'll probably remember what it is. I don't remember off the top of the head. And you just came back with, see what happens when the fetus doesn't get enough oxygen.
Actually, I don't remember what David said because you couldn't clarify it enough for just saying when he said something stupid. I really couldn't make the choice. But yeah, no, actually, he always took everything in stride, except the one day on Atlanta TV he got kind of ticked off at me because I said, Sweet Stan was available, right? So I said Madonna and Sean Penn just got a divorce, so Sweet Stan could be Madonna's next Sean. I said Joan Collins and Peter Holm got a divorce, so Sweet Stan could be Joan Collins' next Peter. David didn't like that.
I want to make mention of two things before we get back to the phone calls. This has to do with the shows on, I think it was Friday's show. Anyway, the caller on your show today who said that WCW versus New Japan pay-per-view was Starrcade 96 was wrong. It was, in fact, Starrcade 95, which is what I thought, because I was all confused when he said it was 96. Anyway, Starrcade 96 was headlined by Hulk Hogan against Roddy Piper, but there was a decent opening match between Malenko and Ultimo Dragon. As I recall, that was much better than decent. I think the match was, phenomenal. This is from Justin Krast, who was talking about the book Frank Gotch, American Hero. Mike Chapman's newest book on Frank Gotch is much like you said. It was good for chronological historical data, but terrible for truthful historical insight. It's a historical novel, not a straight biography, so it's told in story format. Chapman completely blows off any negative points of Gotch's career. Gotch's loss to Tom Jenkins is barely mentioned, and only done so to put over his final win over Tom Jenkins. Similarly, Gotch's loss to Fred Beal isn't mentioned at all, only in a passing reference to point out that it happened to be his last loss. Regarding Fred Beal in the 1911 Hackenschmidt matches, Chapman portrays both matches as total shoots, and has Gotch even say in the book something to the effect of, yeah, people think I worked those matches, but I'm far above doing something like that. Chapman also portrays Jenkins as being the dirty wrestler in his matches with Gotch, even though all the other evidence points to the opposite, like Gotch gouging Jenkins' fake eye, which is never mentioned in the book. In the end, the book is very good for tracking Gotch's career. Insight into his pre-media icon status is very useful, as is his relationship with boxer Jim Johnson and his personal life, although I'm doubtful how straight Gotch was, no matter how Chapman writes him as. So anyway.
So basically you had a kind of an all-American nice guy fella that says that he doesn't like to throw matches, and you had another evil, dirty wrestler that was trying to cheat him. Wonder where all this stuff got started.
In the 1880s, I think. Somewhere in there. I gotta read this one to you. I guess
I bet Gotch was spinning in his grave when Toots Mondt got the credit for inventing the finish.
Well, so those guys in the 1880s were doing that, like the original Strangler Lewis. I remember reading something. There was some article from the 1880s, and it was about a Strangler Lewis match with somebody, not Evan Strangler Lewis, and it was just talking about how he hadn't lost in 8 years, and he was coming to some city, and the newspaper was basically saying, well, this is what the result of the match is going to be. This guy's going to win the first fall. This guy's going to win the second fall. And it was like they're giving the results ahead of time of a match. This is in the 1880s, and some people will insist that wrestling was all on the up and up until 1920.
Vince invented the finish.
Vince invented everything. 1984, he invented wrestling, and then in 1988,
I thought that was Vince Russo.
He reinvented it.
He reinvented it and nearly killed it.
Oh yeah, that's like when that guy made that square wheel. I was talking about. You were talking earlier about Bischoff. Bischoff buying WCW. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case. Obviously, it's not, because these are all well-known, world-respected businessmen involved, and not shysters and conmen and carnies. But one of the oldest tricks in the old-time wrestling business was to get the book and get some pull in a territory and run that sucker all the way down to where it was about to go down the drain, and then buy it from the poor beleaguered promoter for a song, and then pop it back up. But, I think that, sometimes people learn to kill the thing too well.
Well, you know what the thing on this one is that I think one of the reasons, seriously, why this deal hasn't gone through is because I think that there's people at TBS who, they may not know those exact stories that you know, but they know versions of them from other businesses, and they don't want to be the poor beleaguered sucker who sells it back to this guy because he's the one who killed it in the first place. And so that's why I think they really I think that's one of the reasons why this deal keeps getting stalled, and why they did so much serious negotiation with Vince McMahon.
Well, and also those are just old wrestling stories. Nothing like that would ever really happen in real life.
This is from Kevin Blackwell, who said something
they
that
could at least fire Russo just to make sure. Wouldn't you think?
Well, but that's like one of those fires where it's like, okay, just sit home. We'll send you the check. You're fired, and I'll tell you when to come back.
Yeah, they did that one too. I'll tell you what. The thing when they brought him back, that one really scared me, because it's like at the beginning, it's like he had a good line and everything, and I mean, except for Jim Cornette and about 5 other people who actually were at the meetings with him and knew what he did and what Vince McMahon did. I mean, the rest of us just had to take Russo's word for it, and the company went way up during that period, and the other company went way down, and I could see why they hired him, but what it was? It was during that world title tournament when Russo put that world title tournament, and there was 31 matches in this tournament. This was going on October, November of last year. And every single one of them had 1 million run-ins. And of the 31 matches, I think only 2 of them were good, and they both involved Benoit. At that point, I realized that that somehow or other this thing wasn't living up to its potential. And I started getting worried. And then that day when he decided he was going to have a battle royal to make a world champion and put it on Tank Abbott as world champion, I realized, and that was the same day, by the way, that Russo got fired the first time.
Well,
that he just didn't have it.
The story is this little kid goes in the blacksmith shop and Smith says, "Now, son, now don't touch nothing in here. I'm warning you, don't screw nothing up. You can get hurt." And the blacksmith has the horseshoe, and he's got it all in the fire, and he's got it all red hot and everything, fixing to bend it. He sets it down for a second, turns his back. The kid grabs the horseshoe and, whoo, throws it up in the air. And the guy said, "See there, I told you not to touch nothing. You might get hurt." And he said, "No, it just don't take me long to look at a horseshoe." If it was WCW and Russo, WCW would have picked that horseshoe Russo up and put it in their back pocket and be sitting on it for 3 days before they realized it shouldn't take them very long to look at a horseshoe.
Let's go to Dimitri in Albany. Dimitri, what's up?
Hey, Jim.
Hey.
Did you try to bring Abdullah the Butcher into WWF when you were there?
That's right. Somebody asked that the other day.
Did I want to?
Yeah.
Yes, I thought when Mick came in that it would be fabulous to do something with him, and this was one of my first bones of contention with Russo because I think I had suggested Abdullah in a box, and later on I had Terry Funk in a box, because you know what? It's a rule of thumb in wrestling. The guy that comes out of the box gets over. I'm sorry, but, that's the way it is. The guy that comes out of the box gets over. But at any rate, I had suggested Abdullah, but it never came to pass.
That you think there's like a place for him today in wrestling?
Abdullah?
Yeah.
Dave, if I'm not mistaken, he still wrestles, doesn't he?
Yeah, Big Japan.
Yeah.
Probably just some indies. Oh, not again! Go! Kill him!
I thought we had a rule.
We have a. Yeah. What is that rule? No banging pots and pans during the show.
No banging pots on the air.
What was that?
That's right. All right, let's go to Chris in Long Island. And I know you're going to have a more intelligent question than the last guy.
Hello?
Chris. I swear I knew he would.
For you.
Chris, what's...
Hello?
Chris, what's going on?
Oh, yeah, hi, I'm sorry. I have a couple questions for Mr. Cornette and a couple for you, if I can. First, I just wanted to ask him about his time managing Vader. Just in general, what was he like to work with, and did he foresee him ever getting another shot in America again?
Well, I liked managing Vader. I thought, he was a great talent. He was one of the best big men in the history of the business. Unfortunately, he got sidetracked really when he got started in the WWF because he was coming off of he wasn't even coming off of it. He had a shoulder injury, made his debut, and then had to take some time off to get the shoulder operated on. His weight went up. And so I don't think that the WWF actually got Vader like Vader could be Vader.
Also, too, I don't know if you've ever addressed this publicly. If you even want to, if you don't, that's fine. New Jack from ECW has a shoot interview that he did a while ago where he has some comments about you as far as he called you a racist and this and that. Do you have anything to say about that, or have you ever...
Are you now, or have you ever been a member of the racist party? No, New Jack's problems were basically whether he was black, blue, green, orange, or polka dotted. New Jack got to be a star way too quick. Unfortunately, he got to be a star before anybody else even knew he was a star. And New Jack has a lot of opinions about a lot of things, but I think the record speaks for itself in the fact that the guy that made it out of that team that was in Smoky Mountain, New Jack and Mustafa and D'Lo, was D'Lo, because D'Lo actually used that opportunity to be in Smoky Mountain and to work with the guys that he worked with, to learn what he was doing and to learn how to get along and to perfect his craft instead of worrying about how famous he was or how much money he made or who said this or that about him. And so D'Lo's the one that you see now on television, and New Jack's the one you see falling off balconies near you.
Okay, and lastly, since you also worked with this guy and everybody likes to tell stories about him, everybody likes to hear him, do you have any good Owen Hart prank stories or anything that maybe nobody's talked about that has made it public that you could just...
Well, so many people have told stories about Owen. I don't think Owen's pulled any joke that hadn't been retold, but they were all fun. I mean, Owen was just... It wasn't like he...
Hello?
Hello?
I had a problem with my phone, sorry.
It wasn't like he would spend 3 days setting something up. It was like he was just always into something. I mean, even if it was standing there doing, interviews on TV and he had his water bottle and he was squirting me and Davey Boy in the crotch so it looked like we'd wet ourselves on television. He's just always into something, and that's why he was always fun to be around.
Okay. As for Dave, I just had a couple questions about the pay-per-view yesterday. Or one question, actually, about the pay-per-view. Do you think the reason that the main event really didn't have the heat that it should have had was because it followed that Tajiri Whipwreck tag match? because there were so many spots that the crowd just went nuts for, and there was nothing really that, as hard as they worked and as good as they were, there was nothing that really those three guys did or really could do that was along those same lines that I think got the crowd is into it. I think it was just a bad match to kind of follow right after that.
I think you want to really see Sandman.
Partially, I think partially, it was just a weird crowd. Paul Heyman, as late as that morning, because I actually talked to him very briefly that morning, and he was debating back and forth which match to put on last, and who's going to put the tag team title or the three-way. And he was leaning towards three-way because it was the world title and the idea that you put the world title on last. But he kind of knew that it was going to be tough to follow the tag team match, and I don't know. I think that the problem was that a lot of the matches went long, and it was a crowd. I mean, every match after the 10-minute mark, the crowd wasn't into. It was just, I think it's partially the thing. Brian's right. Because the fact is, it isn't even the time. I mean, the first minute of that match, those guys were out there. Lynn and Credible were out there doing some really good wrestling right away, and the crowd's going, we want Sandman, we want Sandman. And right then I go, these guys are going to have a real hard time. I knew it right away. And then as the more the match went on, it was like they were having an even harder time. And I was just feeling sorry for them.
Yeah, they're going to have a hard time too, because I was listening to the Law earlier, and from what you were on it also, yesterday. And they were talking about how the crowd really didn't. I mean, they weren't really sure who to be behind it. I think it's because Credible's supposed to be a heel, and I guess Lynn was supposed to be a face, but with Carino in it was kind of weird because Carino was like so in between, and I don't think they knew one way or another if they even knew who they wanted to win the title, or if, you know what I mean?
All three guys were in between, and that's why they wanted Sandman. And they wanted Sandman in the match because he was in the main event the time before, and he's the only one that was a clear-cut babyface because Lynn, everyone knows, is turning. Plus, they were mad at him because they thought he was leaving. Carino's a tweener, and Credible is supposed to be a heel, but he's a New York guy, and the match is in New York, so the fans half wanted to like him. So, it created this three guys that they didn't really care greatly one way or the other about.
Sounds like a clear-cut case of excellent matchmaking to me.
Lastly, do I have time for one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, when you were talking about the old-timers and stuff earlier and the way they kind of protect the business still, I was listening to a couple interviews with guys like George Steele and Freddie Blassie. And is it frustrating for you when you talk to them? Because I was listening to some of the interview and they would be giving stories and a lot of good stories about things, and then they'll talk about their matches as if they were real matches when they obviously weren't, and talk about I messed around and he beat me, or that night he was tough but I beat him, or I got beat, and this and that. And they talk like it was a real match. And is that frustrating for you when you're trying to do an interview, and how do you just handle that? Do you let them know beforehand that you?
Let me ask you a question, and then we'll let Dave answer that after from the other side of it. Did you ever look at it let's say, for example, you're a baseball reporter, a sports reporter, and you get the chance to talk to Babe Ruth or Mickey Mantle or Joe DiMaggio, and they exaggerate their game a little bit too, but at the same time, you sit there and you just love being in the presence of guys who actually made history, and you listen to the stories and have fun and don't worry about whether they're being altogether honest about their performance.
Yeah, I definitely figured that was the reason. I mean, if I was talking to somebody and they were doing that, I'm not going to correct them or anything, but I mean, before the interview, do they?
Actually, I think you should. I think anytime you talk to Freddie Blassie, you should correct him. Remind him when he tells you a story that no, he didn't really win that match, and he didn't really bump that guy on the head. And then come back after the first time you do it and let me know how it went.
It was an interesting interview, but he talked about all of his matches like they were shoots, and everybody,
to be honest, that's how they all grew up, and it takes a long time to get that. And you'll find even with the active wrestlers that are in their 40s that grew up with that mentality, it's very, very difficult. Even for Jim, it's very difficult in certain circumstances to do that. And for younger guys, they were taught differently, so it's just a different mentality in a different world. We've got a ton of emails to get to. I want to get to a couple of these, and we'll get back to the phone lines. The problem with that Starrcade thing, this is so silly, but it's actually pretty funny. The Starrcade 95 with the New Japan WCW, what was it called? What did they call that? The World Cup of Wrestling? Is that what they called it? I forget the name. Where it was the show where Shinjiro Otani wrestled Eddie Guerrero and Sting wrestled Kensuke Sasaki. Which was Starrcade 95. It was released on WCW home video under the name Starrcade 96, and that's why that's why everyone is confused about that. Okay, let's see. Are there any websites I can order Gary Capetta and Dynamite Kid's book? Gary Capetta's www.bodyslams.com. Dynamite Kid's book, I think you could probably get it at live audio, www.liveaudiowrestling.com. Let's see. Jim, are you there?
My butt kicked if I don't mention our website, because
Okay.
Clark and Pam Patterson, who have CP Graphics here in Louisville, do our website. They are relaunching it soon. It's very near with all new stuff. I don't know what the term is, but it's going to be new.
Redesigned.
And, they will. They're putting up a bunch of new graphics and stuff, but they do a great job. It's ovwrestling.com, and that way you can also buy videotapes, which is the most important thing when you go there.
Can you hear Spoke now?
Say again?
To see if Dave can hear me.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello? Now I can,
We
yeah.
knocked everybody off the air.
There we go.
Okay. Do you mind asking Jim his thoughts on his series of matches in 1996 with Jose Lothario?
Oh, that was fun. Actually, I about died because I was had not been wrestling, and especially was not used to wrestling on those WWF rings, which were like concrete at that point. And I was challenged to fall down a lot at an advanced weight. But it was fun because I loved just being in the ring with Jose. He was a tremendous worker, and he could throw a punch that would just graze off the end of your nose, and it looked like it tore your head off, which I especially enjoyed, rather than the other choice, which would be tearing my head off.
Why did it take the WWF so long to design new rings?
The rings that they had, it was just a case of, do what you've always done. The rings that they had were good for the Hogans and the Andres and the big guys that weren't flying off the top rope and taking a lot of bumps, but, it was murder on the smaller guys, and it was, murder on everybody who was in there bumping and working hard, so they gradually redesigned those things, and it's a whole lot easier on the guys' bodies now.
Let's see, this is from Henry, who goes, I recently watched Beyond the Mat, and you were giving advice to Mike Modest and Tony Jones from All Pro Wrestling. I was wondering what you thought of those two guys, and did anyone in the WWF ever steal Modest's finisher?
Actually, to my knowledge, I don't think so. I like Mike. I think he's a very good technical wrestler. I told him a while back when we talked that his problem was that he didn't have huge size or a weird appearance or anything that stands out otherwise than being like an Arn Anderson, somebody who's all around good at what they do. And it was going to take him longer as a result of that to be able to catch on. And Tony, I thought, was good as well. And, that scene in the movie, that was the one thing that I did. They were always, I wasn't in agreement with having a camera behind the scenes in the locker room in the wrestling business. Just, it gave me gas. So I avoided him for about 6 months, and they asked me to do one thing, and that was it. And I figured, well, if anything in the world will ever end up on the cutting room floor, it'll be this. I'll do it. They'll shut up, and I'll go on. And son of a gun, they put it in the movie. So you never know.
This is from Nick, who goes, in your opinion, who is the most overrated person in the wrestling business today?
Oh, gosh.
Sable's not in the business this week.
Overrated. I mean, there's a lot of choices for that, unfortunately, and they're generally all making a lot of money. The Kevin Nashes of the world, who you mentioned before for obvious reasons. There's a lot of guys, especially down there, that don't work nearly as hard for their dollar as the guys who are better equipped and have shown more talent and have shown more devotion, but unfortunately haven't, for some reason, been given the ball to carry in the past. So it'd be unfair to all these crooks to single out just one.
There's one thing, I actually wanted to bring this up. You got a guy on your roster, and you talked about him a little bit earlier, Leviathan, Dave Bautista. And there's one thing about him that's because of his look, because he's so big and so muscular and everything like that. And I was thinking about, the whole makeup of a wrestling card. He would be, as far as, if he were to go to the WWF, and he were to be in that lower card level, first match, second match guy, it would be a total disaster. But as a main eventer, he might catch on, and I think that there's something, and I almost see that as another problem with WCW, in that they're trying to fill their roster up. And this, what I say by this is, when you look at the power plant, they have all these huge steroided up guys, okay, and they all, big and strong, and some of them can do some very good athletic moves. But to me, I think that you need the workers to go along with those guys if you're going to have a good promotion. I think that
exactly.
You can't have all those guys against each other from the opening match.
Surgeons. You have all types of styles and all different kinds of matches, and so for example, on the card on the 13th, Leviathan is wrestling Kane, which is, two movie monsters in action, and then you've got Chris Benoit against Nick Dinsmore, where they can stretch each other and show their talents in their particular style. I think you got to do that, and Leviathan is so impressive. If you send him out in a first or second match environment to go 8 or 9 minutes with somebody maybe 50 pounds lighter and do a bunch of arm drags and monkey flips, then it doesn't get over. It doesn't get, they're looking at this guy going, geez, he ought to be able to kill this guy. It doesn't add up. So you got to be able to send a guy like Leviathan who is down here. He's doing the same kind of drills in class. He's doing the same kind of moves that everybody else does, but there's some things because of his look he shouldn't do. It's not that he can't, it's just that he shouldn't. These other guys that we were talking about, there's things they can't do that they should be doing, but they can't do. There's a big difference there. So I think Leviathan's going to be ready to do whatever. Once he gets there, he'll be able to do whatever the guy in the ring with him wants to do and can do, but he'll know the difference in the things that he shouldn't do.
This is regarding. I guess this basic question is for people who do not read the sheets, and in fact, even if you do read the sheets, you wouldn't know this. What is basically you and Mark Madden? Where did it start? Because I got to tell you a story. Who was it? Who was it that I was talking? Oh! I got to tell this story, and you'll get a kick out of this.
I'm sure I will.
This is actually a Mark Madden story, and this was during the period where they thought that WWF was going to buy WCW. Remember that couple-week period?
Right.
And the rumor was that Jim Ross was going to be in charge, and of course, Mark Madden flipped because Mark Madden and Jim Ross. Okay, there's heat there, and. I was not in this conversation, but somebody called me up and said that they had a conversation with Mark Madden, and it was about, and they go, Mark, what is it that you hate so much about Jim Ross? And he was going like, God, it's been so many years I don't even remember anymore.
Well, because that's the whole thing comes from what did he make up to write about Jim Ross to please Eric Bischoff when he first got the job on the hotline? That's basically where it comes down to. The heat that he has with every human being in the world, which is every right, upstanding, forthright young Christian man, should hate Mark Madden just on the general principle of it, the big fat piece of, But the thing is that the reason why he has heat with so many people is because when he first got that job on the WCW 900 number and being the classic jock sniffer that he is and never able to do anything in the business physically, he wanted to cement his position by, in effect, giving verbal, oral gratification to Eric Bischoff by knocking anybody that Bischoff didn't like. So if he couldn't find anything truthful about him, then he had to make stuff up, and that's where that heat comes from, with me, with JR, with anybody else that basically wants to pound the bejesus out of Madden anytime they see him. He's a liar.
This is a question that's from Kevin Cura, and I'm going to say, I already know the answer to it, but you can explain it. It goes, do you miss being part of the WWF on a day-to-day basis, or do you enjoy being a part of the developmental territory more?
Oh, and once again, it's not that I didn't like the people in the WWF, but the choice of living in Louisville against living in Connecticut and working with these guys and doing what I'm doing now, there's no contest. Especially because I'm nowhere near the George Washington Bridge.
What do you have against that bridge? I remember that bridge last time I was there.
Off that bridge.
One of these days, maybe when they repave it and the Honda Civics stop falling through to the river, it would be a little easier to travel.
Now I got a question. This is a theoretical. It has to do with wrestling in a sense. Brian and I had actually discussed this. If you were on a bridge and somebody threw you over, okay, would it make a difference if they did it face to face or behind your back?
And that actually does relate quite well to wrestling. Actually, I don't think it makes much difference, but it would be a lot nicer if they'd shake your hand on the way over.
Because we're just wondering when the Rock talked about throwing Stone Cold off the bridge. You just love that line where
at
just
least it was face to face.
And he goes, when I threw him off the bridge, at least it was face to face.
But that's not only a good promo line, but also it's very allegorical to the wrestling industry as a whole.
Let's go to Steve in New York. Steve, what's going on?
I was at the Hammerstein last night for the pay-per-view, and I just had a few things to comment on.
Mm-hmm.
The main event, the crowd was quite dead.
And what was your feeling as to why?
Well, the crazy Chijiri Whipwreck Kid match stole all its heat. All its thunder was gone, and there were flashers in the crowd, which is like everything you always say between matches, and there were flashers in the crowd, so that took away all the heat. With Sandman, on an ECW pay-per-view, every moment that goes by where Sandman is not there is another moment that you know he's going to be there, and he's going to come through the crowd with that song playing, and he's going to drink beer. So the more he's not there, the more they anticipate it. And by the end of the show, they were frenzied for him. They really just wanted him out there.
What did they do once they got him?
Well, considering the fact I rushed up there too, and I consider myself a total biased smart, and I got crushed by 1,000 people rushing up to him too. Yeah, we just posed behind him and we screamed. So once we got him, we swarmed him.
And bring him out there.
And you kicked him like a dog.
Also, in ECW, because there's obviously no Titantron, and all the interviews for the pay-per-view are backstage, and they don't have TV, a lot of the fans, they literally had no idea what the storylines were, but they were still going to the pay-per-view. So they had no idea what some of the matches were, and because there's no interviews out in the ring, and there's no build-up in the ring, there was no build-up for any of the matches. So, like, we would sit there, and we're like, okay, what's next? And then some alternative rap music would play and be like, I think I remember who has this music. Because, you know, you can play that, after about 3 hours, all that heavy rock music that they played as their entrances, it starts to blend together after a while.
No.
Yeah, it's like, who is this? Until they, like, peek their head through that curtain, we have no idea who's coming out.
Yeah.
And there's no
one of the things is Heyman kept a lot of the cards secret. I mean, like, there were 4 or 5 matches.
That's a good promotional strategy.
You know what was really weird is that in the match which we were talking about, which was the match that to me stole the show, which was Tajiri and Mikey Whipwreck against Super Crazy and Kid Cash, all of the advertising, all of it to the last minute was Super Crazy and a mystery partner. Now, if it's Kid Cash, who's a regular guy on your roster, who's a good worker, who's actually an excellent worker, and if you told people Kid Cash was going to be the partner, I don't think it would have hurt the match because people were looking and wow, that's a great match. And then with the mystery partner, I mean, I guess...
Well, weren't they keeping that open in case Rob Van Dam decided to work the pay-per-view? Just in case?
Perhaps.
Well, then you're setting people up to think that, too, that it might be tall.
Everyone in that audience. Every single person in that audience, down to the girls who came with their boyfriends, knew that was Kid Cash.
Everyone knew it was going to be Kid Cash?
Absolutely everyone knew that was Kid Cash.
Well, I'll tell you what, speaking as a person who runs shows on a fairly regular basis, I'm going to try to adopt that strategy and try to keep all of my lineups secret from now on the theory that people will come wondering what they're going to view.
There was once a meeting in WCW. It was with the Japanese, because I actually heard it from one of the Japanese side guys. And one of the guys who was running the company at the time was getting real mad that some of the house show lineups were getting in the newsletter because they were being advertised in the city, right? And they were going like, wait a minute, if they're just printing the lineups, these weren't like secret lineups months ahead talking about turns that hadn't happened and stuff like that, which I have done in the past
as well. This is what they're advertising in Dubuque, right?
Right, and they were going like, it's because they're advertising the house show lineups, and they're thinking like, well, let's see, and that's a bad thing?
Damn their eyes.
Yeah.
Also, in the main event, besides Sandman, like you said before, we had no idea who to cheer for. I've been watching Hardcore TV every week leading up to this, and Carino started out as a face, and they're trying to turn him into a whiny heel again.
Yeah, that's right. I watch Hardcore TV. I mean, they're trying to make him a tweener, and then it's just really the really weird storylines. They're not very focused, and then Lynn is a baby face that they're obviously in the midst of turning heel.
Actually, we thought he was going to WWF if he lost tonight. So when he lost that first pinfall, the reason we chanted "You sold out," we really thought that he had signed a contract with like WCW.
Oh, you shouldn't chant that at him though.
I know.
Well, damn this thing about proving the allegation. Let's just chant.
Well, ECW, when you're an ECW show, you abandon all sensibility, I would say, because we were chanting Mountain Dew during a match for some reason. Like, at one point, it had nothing to do with the show.
I was trying to figure out what those chants were. It was
Mountain Dew.
Nothing to do with wrestling.
Oh, my God. We are totally out of time. We got to get running now. Jim, I want to thank you very much. Real quick, plug that website.
OVWrestling.com. You can find out all about December 13th.
Okay, and good luck with the show December the 13th. I want to thank everyone for calling in. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mike, and we'll see you tomorrow at 6.